Hi everyone, and welcome to A Marketer's Guide to Programmatic. This webinar is presented to you by PubMatic and powered by Redback Connect. My name is Paige Murphy, and I am a senior journalist here at AdNews. Today, I'm joined by Natasha Demale-Hawes from PubMatic, the Director of Ad Solutions. I'm also joined by Patrick Darcy, the Chief Data and Transformation Officer at Dentsu Aegis Network, and Cara Walsh, who is a Director and Consultant of Copple Hill Consulting. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're here to break down the world of programmatic for everyone and teach you how you can use it more effectively. To start off with, Tash, can you tell us what is programmatic advertising?
Sure. In a nutshell, programmatic advertising is the automated buying and selling of online advertising. With programmatic, the entire process of buying and selling ads is done in real time, with advertisers placing their bids on a specific audience simultaneously, with the highest bidder among them winning the impression. So, for example, if the person in question who's about to look at an ad is a woman with children, and I'm Huggies as an advertiser, I would be bidding higher than, say, a men's shaver brand. Of all the bids that we see in the ecosystem that come through, the highest bid will win. So the more valuable the audience, the higher the bid. And the interesting thing about this is that it all happens in a fraction of a second. Think of it a little bit like the advancement of the stock exchange, from traders going in and waving bits of paper and shouting down the phone to the automation in which they run today. Programmatic has breathed a new life into online advertising, bringing with it the ability to combine multiple layers of data and optimize on these in real time. It's all really boils down to automation and efficiency.
When we talk about real time, could you tell us what is real-time bidding?
Sure. Real-time bidding refers to the buying and selling of online ad impressions through real-time auctions. So these auctions occur in the time it takes a web page to load. So if you go on to any web page that you normally do on a daily basis, in those couple of seconds it takes for everything to load, that's when all this decisioning happens. So an ad impression loads in the web's browser, and then information the page it is on and information about the user who is actually viewing the ad is passed to a technology platform, which is an SSP, which is what PubMatic is. That platform auctions it off to the advertiser willing to pay the highest price for it. The winner's ad is then loaded into the web page nearly instantly. So think of it in a similar way to eBay, in the sense that there is a product that people want to buy. In this case, it's an ad in front of a specific user, and they enter into a bidding war in order to win the product. And then obviously, when it comes down to it, the highest bidder wins.
Great. We talk about marketplaces and bidding, obviously, just before. So could you tell us the difference between a private marketplace and an open marketplace, and which one's better?
Sure. An open marketplace can also be referred to as open exchange or open auction. Basically, what that is an immense pool of sites or apps accessible to all buyers under a bidding model. So just think about it like every site possible accessible through the internet. Private marketplaces, also called PMPs, on the other hand, are predefined deals, one-on-one normally with a specific publisher or set of publishers and a specific advertiser or agency in mind. They're prioritized over the marketplace, so the open marketplace, and have specific negotiated pricing, and they also may have specific targeting overlaid. For example, if somebody wanted to target a specific section of a news website, they could layer that on within a deal. PMPs come in many different forms, such as preferred deals or even guaranteed deals. I wouldn't necessarily say that open marketplace or private marketplace are better than the other. The buying method chosen is normally determined by the campaign goals and the advertiser's requirements.
Great. Now, Cara, you were one of the people that started using programmatic first in the world. From your experience back in the United States and today, what would you say are some of the benefits of programmatic?
I think so. I've used programmatic on the publisher side and on the brand side, and I think there's benefits and drawbacks to both. So, with programmatic for a marketer, you get universal capped impressions, which you don't get when you buy from a number of different networks. You could be showing the same target audience member your ad 50 times when you want your frequency cap to really be 3. So every new network and DSP that you add is going to be eliminating your ability to do frequency capping. So I think that's one huge benefit. You get a larger pool of inventory and you move away from contextual. So I want to reach 20 to 30-year-old women. So you place an ad on Cosmopolitan, to actually using data to have inferred or defined behavioral interests to reach the people that you want. So there's a lot more ability to layer on data about users, and then you can buy that impression wherever the user happens to be. One of the things, I know efficiency is brought up a lot. I think, from a branding perspective, programmatically, you're probably getting less impressions, but they cost more. So from an efficiency standpoint, it's more efficient for ad operations. It's more efficient for getting on thousands of publishers' websites. But in terms of the overall number of impressions that you're getting served, you might not necessarily see greater reach. You just might see better performance. So you might be reaching the right people. So your conversion is much higher. But from a branding perspective, you just have to be careful that you're losing that kind of global reach when you do the spray and pray non-targeted campaigns that were traditional. The relevance in programmatic, so you can add on so many different types of targeting and layers. You can add, all of the traditional display, like demographic information and location, but on top of that, do third-party and first-party data. So the third-party data being other companies' information about an individual, whether it's Google or whether you buy through BlueKai or other data management platforms, which are DMPs, or first-party data, which is linking into your own kind of CRM and your own data stores to retarget some of your existing customers. From a direct standpoint, one of the things people like is that it's guaranteed. You know what you're going to get. So I think a lot of the more traditional marketers like that because they know they're going to spend this amount. They know where it's going to appear. There's a bit more brand control. The publisher that is going to be showing your ad, as opposed to kind of going out there and not sure what article or what website your ad might appear on. So if brand control is a big issue for you, I think direct could be the way to go. And you can get better pricing on bulk inventory. So as a marketer, you need to look at what's my spend, what's my monthly spend. And if you're a large marketer, you should probably look at maybe playing in both of those. But if you're a smaller marketer, I think RTB might be the way to go to find the people that you need.
Yeah. Pat, what about you? What do you think are some of the benefits for marketers, and which should they choose, RTB or programmatic direct?
Look, I mean, I'd just build on what Cara said. I think there are a lot of benefits. I might be slightly biased. I've done this for a really long time, but there are a lot of benefits. And I think, Cara definitely touched on them in terms of targeting abilities, efficiencies, because you have the ability to remove duplication of audiences or media types, etc. But I think that for me, it's really oriented towards outcomes. And just even in the DNA of the technology, when you set up campaigns, right? It's at every stage of the process that you really have to specify what does the client want from this campaign, and the technology works really, really hard to deliver it. And so I think that from its outset, really, it's been oriented towards delivering outcomes. Now we don't always get it right, but I think that's a pretty fundamental difference. I think the other thing too is the agility and ability to optimize. So absolutely, be that creative, be that your investment, be that the partners and publishers you work with, it's got an ability to fluidly move and traverse a lot of those things to get the right outcomes out of a campaign. But I think about the COVID-19 experience as well, and Programmatic was able to act a lot quicker, be that getting more investment in, pulling it out. And so I think there's not just an agility in campaign delivery, but I think that ecosystem has an ability to kind of move with the market quicker as well. And I think within that same vein, it's not typically constrained by some of the same things as other buying methods, delete and charge in TV, or fixed pack buying in out of home, or those things that while I understand them, I think they're representative of an old way of doing things. And I think Programmatic has managed to remove some of those barriers as well. In terms of the second part of the question around RTB or direct, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think it's about choosing whether you do one or the other. In the majority of campaigns we run today, we'll use both on a campaign. Fundamentally, it's a question of how limited is the supply that you want to get access to. If you're talking, premium video, BVOD, at certain times, your ability to access that outside of a direct buy is hard. And so, publishers will require you fix a higher price and guarantee you'll take a certain amount of impressions from them, because there's a lot of competition in that market. And so you'd need to have a higher portion of your buy be direct, right, to be able to get access to the supply. Similarly, at times like this, where there's a lot of video coming through, then the open marketplace, you would be able to access it. But again, for me, it's not really a decision as to which one. We use both on all campaigns, and it's a way to offset delivery risk. You shore up with direct the inventory that you need to pre-secure, but you offset that with targeting in the open marketplace as well, which just gives you a little bit more efficiency and potentially reduces your net costs.
I forgot to two of the points as you were talking. I've realized the machines are smarter than people in many instances in terms of knowing who wants to buy your product, and that's something that when you buy direct and you do traditional buying, you lose all of that. So, I mean, the two examples I could think of, they're from the US, but the hair, like dyeing hair for men. So they targeted all of these men to buy hair dye, and they got no sales. They did a generic run of network just to find out who was converting, and it was wives. And the product started flying off the shelves. So the machine knew how to go find the people that would convert. But if you take a human who's sitting at an ad trafficking platform and trying to pick exactly what websites to go on, they may not have done that. And the other example I can think of is Skechers said, we want to target football enthusiasts, males, to sell our sneakers. But it turned out they were just like chubby fat dudes sitting on the couch, and nobody bought their sneakers. So they did a run of network and found out that business travelers and pet owners started buying their shoes. And so they were able to then inform their offline and even their TV buys with that knowledge that they had from the data that came from just untargeted. So I think that's a really important part of programmatic, is to set some parameters of what you want to target, but then also don't set any and just see what happens if you have a large enough budget, because the machine is there to tell you where the people are. And I think a frequent mistake people make in programmatic is humans trying to control the machine and not let it just do its thing and see what happens.
Yeah. Now, Tash, I know you touched on this a little bit before about what PubMatic is. Could you talk us through the supply chain and who are the different moving parts involved in the supply chain?
Yeah, so sure. So, I mean, one thing that has been a hot topic over the last few years has been supply chain transparency. Cara kind of touched on it earlier. So more brand advertising is flowing into the programmatic ecosystem. And players on both sides of the industry are beginning to rebel against the complexity of the supply chain and demand transparency and also efficiency. In the past, I would say that it's been quite difficult to control exactly where your ads are going when it comes to programmatic. And one of the things that people have been scared of when it comes to programmatic is being able to really understand exactly where they're placing their ads. Over the last few years, media buyers have put a microscope up to their supply paths to ensure that every dollar of ad spend is impactful as possible. So when it comes to like the complexity of this, like if you think about all the parties that are involved within the actual programmatic ecosystem, it can get quite convoluted and confusing. So like in a nutshell, you know, an advertiser wants to spend money on a certain web page or a bunch of web pages. Generally, that advertiser may engage with an agency or within their internal advertising brands to buy programmatically. One of the biggest platforms on the buy side is called a DSP, or demand side platform. And they are basically the technology layer that buyers use in order to buy advertising through programmatically. Those DSPs or demand side platforms are connected to an SSP such as PubMatic. And what we do is work with publishers to surface their inventory through to demand pipes. So a DSP is connected to an SSP. An advertiser uses that DSP to buy, and the publisher uses the SSP to push their inventory through. That's kind of like it in the very simplest forms. If you actually start like looking into the even more layers, there are measurement providers and certification vendors, like to make sure that things like brand safety is adhered to, that there's certain keywords they might want to target. There's data players that Cara mentioned earlier. So there's many layers and many vendors. And each of these players, from DSPs to SSPs and everything in between, such as data, brand safety vendors, measurement vendors, and so on, they all have a fee or a clip of the ticket between the advertiser and the publisher. So what players like PubMatic are doing are ensuring that we are transparent as possible with our fees and opening to sharing what they look like through things like log level data and reporting. Lots of DSPs are very transparent with their fees as well, as are, you know, measurement vendors, etc. So what we've seen advertisers really wanting to do is uncover each one of these fees to really understand exactly where their dollar is going and how much of that $1 that they're spending on one end is getting through to the publisher. From a PubMatic perspective, we've actually worked with a number of agencies and advertisers direct, where we've signed an agreement to place the management of that supply fee, or the tech fee, in the buyer's control in order to empower advertisers to improve the efficiency of their programmatic and their supply path. And this really drives sustainable increases in digital advertising revenue to publishers and better efficiencies for advertisers in terms of return on investment. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell.
Now, we've touched on brand safety a little bit. Pat, could you tell me, how can marketers ensure they're getting brand safety when they're placing their ads through programmatic pipes?
Yeah, sure. I think, and I did just want to sort of touch on what Tash was saying as well, because you know, this is for marketers and for our clients, and so it's really important. But ultimately, that supply chain exists to make a campaign more effective, and, you know, a client get more return on their spend. You don't always need all parts, right? And there is a cost associated to using some. But I think it's really important we kind of come back to that point, which is relatively simple, although difficult in execution. But, you know, if the value return to the client's business isn't greater than the costs in that supply chain, then you wouldn't do it. But in many, many cases, it is, and that's why those programmatic's been so successful, and the technologies within it have been so successful, because when you get it right, you are often delivering far greater value back to clients and their businesses than the costs in the middle. And I think we've just got to sort of make sure that we're remembering they do play an important role. And yeah, so in terms of, and I guess it very much links to that point around your question of brand safety. And I think that there are many ways. There are technologies that specialize kind of ensuring within, in particular, the digital ecosystem, that ads are being delivered to human beings. The brands are able to define what brand safety means to them, because it really is in the eye of the beholder in some regard, and you can set up campaigns to ensure that's adhered to. Similarly, ads being viewed, which is important, right? Otherwise you wouldn't want to. So there's absolutely technologies in place within that supply chain that are very, very good at doing that. But I think there are also just the fundamentals in how you set up campaigns. You know, Programmatic has access to a huge amount of supply, but it doesn't mean you have to target your campaigns to that huge amount of supply. There's still a lot of importance in the direct partnerships with media owners and publishers. There's still a lot of importance around, you know, defining the media sources and types that you want your ads to run on, and kind of closing that out via whitelists or things that determine, you know, where a client's happy to run. So I think the technology is there and plays an important role, but there are still the fundamental sort of just principles of setting up media campaigns that can apply in the programmatic world as well.
Yeah. Cara, what are some of the things that you would be looking for as a marketer when looking to work with the right vendors?
Like on the back of the supply chain, I would be looking to eliminate as many people in that chain as possible. So I think, you know, if you're going to an agency that doesn't do their own media buying, well, then there's a markup, and then they go to someone else, and then they go, you know, so I would be trying, depending on what my spend was, to go to some of the big players with the big platforms, because the larger the DSP, the better the learnings, and the smarter the machine learnings are going to be. So the more media that DSP is buying and engaging with, the smarter it's going to be in helping your campaigns. What I would do, there's that famous Luma Partners slide, which every conference on advertising brings that up at some point, and every startup in, you know, advertising wants to make it onto that slide. But if I was a marketer, I would, you know, Google the Luma Partners landscape. I would print that out, and I would go meet with potential partners and have them walk you through, point, and explain all the players in the chain that they are going to use to reach your objectives. So you have to, the beginning of the Luma Partners slide says publisher, and the end says, you know, the customer. So everything in between there, you know, what is your, or the advertiser and then the publisher, sorry, advertiser, publisher. And so how do you have to get your message onto the right website or to the right eyeball? If they can't explain all the players in the chain and the role they're going to play and the cost it's going to infer, I wouldn't use them. I mean, so the latest stats are saying that 50 cents on the dollar is not actually going to the media buy. It's going to the other players in the chain. That's extreme. And I think the advertising industry has done itself a huge disservice in allowing that complexity and allowing that kind of mayhem. And I don't think there's anyone in the industry that could explain to you in detail every single box on that chain. They all have their own little idiosyncrasies, and it's really complex. So, you know, just to kind of reiterate what was said earlier, some of them have a role, and if brand is your number one priority, maybe you want to have like a Tier 39, or you want to add some of these players to check the integrity of the content on a web page. If you're Delta, maybe you want to make sure you're not appearing next to an airline crash. That's very important to your brand. You might want to layer that cost in, but for other people, it probably doesn't make sense. So I would print out the Luma Partners landscape slide. I would sit with a potential partner, and I would ask who's in the chain, and then I would ask what levers can you pull in your DSP. What are the levers that I can use to target, to whitelist, to blacklist, demographic targeting? What data can I integrate with? And go meet with 3 people and ask the same exact questions, and then you'll get a sense of who the right partner is.
Yeah. Pat, for you, working in agencies, what are some of the common questions you hear from marketers, or what should they be asking of their agencies?
It tends to be determined by what you guys are writing about normally. We seem to, those questions follow what they're reading. But I think, and I guess on the back of that, certainly at the moment, and to Kara's point, we get asked a lot about the supply chain, this idea of working media. I think we need to be really, really cautious when talking about this stuff, because, 50 cents in the dollar, I agree, it is extreme. But, previously, if over half of your ads weren't being seen, then is 100% to the publisher right if they weren't being viewed, right? And so we've just got to be kind of cautious. It is an important lead indicator in some regard, but I think that our job as agencies, while it is to ensure that we're spending a client's money effectively, that doesn't necessarily equal just hand it all over to a media owner, right? It's got to be effective at the same time, and sometimes it may be less ads are served, or less of that money gets to paid media because there's technology in the supply chain, but the effectiveness of the campaign is greater and the outcomes to the client is greater. It's not necessarily just determined by how many cents in the dollar make it to a publisher. That doesn't dictate success necessarily, so we've got to be cautious. I think in terms of the other questions, obviously third-party cookies, and in fact all the announcements around browser changes and privacy and ID changes, I think that they are really important questions. I think that your agency should absolutely have answers to those questions, but I think we also need to recognize that this is a pretty seismic change for us, one that we're going to need to adapt to and over time, right? This isn't happening tomorrow. And I think that there are certainly some questions that can't be answered. And then I think the other couple for me are how to determine value in under this sort of broad definition of programmatic. Now, I think programmatic for me, I wished by now we weren't using the term, but perhaps just got a little way to go before we're not. But I think now what it describes is so broad and far-reaching, and there's so much to it. It isn't a thing; it's a set of things and ways that we can run campaigns. So I think clients are trying to grapple with, how do they determine sort of the value of any one part of this, and that's like a how long's a piece of string question. It really comes down to, and I think Karen made the point earlier, who are you partnering with? What does success look like for you? How many people, how sophisticated is how you're trying to run campaigns? Are you bringing first-party data into that equation, or are you using others? There's a whole set of questions that really are required to determine that, and it's not equal by client. And then I think the other part is around, what should clients have in-house versus what should they be using partners for? This idea of sort of in-house or not. And again, it's not mutually exclusive or binary. I think that the right thing is different for different clients and is often a combination of answers, right? I think absolutely today clients need to be considering what technologies they have control over internally, especially around the management of their data, with all the regulatory changes around privacy and stuff like that. I think that there is a not just around first-party data. I think that clients having a bit more control over the infrastructure that they have internally also enables them to simplify the ecosystem that we're just talking about being really, really complex. So again, not one size fits all, but I think we definitely have a lot of clients coming to us at the moment sort of asking, well, what is the right answer and combination as to what should they have and have control over, and what makes sense to use your agency for or partners for.
Yeah, just jumping in there as well. I think a lot of the stuff around brand safety and questions from marketers kind of comes down to a bit of education and understanding. So obviously brand safety is key to brands. And, you know, in the last few years, when there used to just be a single path to a publisher in the programmatic ecosystem, now, you know, there's so many paths to that one publisher. So it's very hard to keep a track of everything. So I've definitely seen a trend of brands and their agencies looking to establish closer and tighter relationships with a smaller number of partners. You know, Cara kind of touched on it as well, like you don't need to work with everyone. We've seen that specific to the supply kind of piece, where buyers and marketers are looking to supply path optimize, which is basically, you know, ensuring that they're working with a smaller number of partners to ensure that those partners are adhering to specific standards and being transparent and not charging hidden fees, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the best way to kind of really understand where you're buying and ensure brand safety and like fraud free, et cetera, et cetera. So I think one of the things I've seen is buyers being able to realize the benefits of quality SSPs and quality supply, and ensure their ad spend ends up on, you know, premium apps and domains. You know, and that's another way of being able to ensure brand safety and ensure that you're buying in the right place at the right time and not paying unnecessary fees as well.
We touched on this as well, you just mentioned it before, Pat, but third-party cookies. So obviously Google made the announcement that they would get rid of them this year. So what does that mean for marketers, and how will that impact programmatic as we know it at the moment?
It means we all need to adapt, but we're very good at that. So I think the first thing is don't panic, and it's kind of, you know, it's been wrapped up as kind of a doomsday prepping kind of thing. It's not, right? It's just part of the evolution of our industry. We need to adapt to it, and we're very good at that. And it's also not tomorrow. You know, there is a little bit of time. Certainly the key areas that is going to require we all adapt, and certainly marketers is thinking about targeting. You know, it is going to reduce in a good way, I think, the number of options out there for targeting data. We're not going to have all of these first party, second party, third party, fourth party, other party, some other thing, right? Which is for clients to consider, because that will simplify. And I think as part of that, again, it's going to really emphasize the importance of clients understanding their own data assets and how they bring it into the equation. It's going to place a lot of, I think, importance on using your first party data for targeting. And then I think measurement. So it's going to definitely change the way that we measure. I don't think it changes what we measure, but it definitely changes the way we measure. And again, I don't see that as a bad thing, and it probably will move us away in some regard from the obsession of sort of proxy media metrics. Like it's going to have to be much more effectiveness and outcomes back to client, which I think is a really, really good thing. And yeah, I think that generally speaking, and not just from a data perspective, I think a lot of the middlemen players that Cara was referring to earlier, I don't think will exist too far into the future, or certainly not in their current form, because they're so heavily reliant on, you know, third-party cookies as a way of building their value prop. And again, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I think that we could really benefit from some simplification in the ecosystem, but without getting, you know, overly technical on this, because I don't think it's the right place for it. But we're talking about third-party cookies going as well, not them completely, and it will change how we think about targeting and measurement. It doesn't remove it completely. And as I said, while the idea of brands having a really solid sort of first-party data strategy and how they use it can seem intimidating, they've got a bit of time to get it right. And they absolutely should be talking to their agencies, if they're not already, around what the changing role of an agency is in this ecosystem, because helping brands navigate through this, it's really, really important. And it's no longer just a placing media conversation, right? This starts to become a technology conversation in client. What have you got? You know, how can we help? And how do we connect your bits and our bits like in clients? So yeah.
Yeah, Tash, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, so you know, Pat's touched on quite a few things already, but you know, I guess in reality, you know, third-party cookies did not work in all environments anyway. You know, CTV, for example. So with these changes that we've seen to block the usage of third-party cookies, you know, we have already been kind of dealing with that to some extent in the industry already. I think the tightening of consumer privacy regulations is a good thing. The main thing that I see that it means is that, you know, audience addressability in, you know, a cookie environment is deteriorating. So we need to rethink, you know, campaign performance and what the viable alternatives could be. So, I mean, overall, I think that it is a very positive change and great for consumers. And I think the biggest thing is that it creates an opportunity to create an identity solution the right way. So thinking about consumers first, thinking about being privacy safe, you know, compliant, future-proof, so we can run across all platforms, and less probabilistic. So although identity and audience has not been really solved yet for the open internet, I've definitely seen the industry start to come together and collaborate on a common solution or common solutions, and look to provide an opportunity for identity that's outside of the walled gardens like Google and Facebook. So overall I see it as a positive thing, and I think it's, you know, a catalyst for change.
I think there's a really unique opportunity right now, and if the timing doesn't align, it's going to be a real expensive problem for marketers and agencies and publishers. The ACCC last August, you know, did a commission to see whether advertising was affecting journalistic integrity. The answer was no. But at the end of the report, they said, there's this thing called programmatic, and it's alarming, and we're not quite sure what's happening with customers' data. So they formed a ministerial committee to investigate this, which has been, you know, happening over the last few months. So you have that kind of governmental body, the government trying to get up to speed, because they haven't been on this journey like the marketers and the publishers and the agencies, trying to get up to speed and get the knowledge about what it means. Then you have the IAB trying to form these self-regulation committees. So you have the industry itself trying to go, don't regulate us, we're doing it. You have the government going, we need to look into this. And then you have the commercial side, like Google, forcing changes. And if all of the parties don't come together to say, what is the plan going to be moving forward, you're going to end up with a cluster of requirements from the commercial sector, from the government, and, you know, potentially from the IAB. So I think it's a real opportunity for the big players in Australia to come together and solve the problem and help the government solve the problem, because I'm probably certain they don't have any programmatic experts on the committee trying to solve the problem.
No, definitely. Now, I know Tash touched on this before about third-party cookies going or not being as useful across different formats. What are some of the other opportunities beyond online that marketers can use programmatic for?
I think back to my point earlier, programmatic now encompasses so much. And I think getting close to being mainstream, I think we've still got some challenges, you know, around just trust. And that comes from the complexity. It comes from, you know, certainly some bad players. It comes from just evolution, and we're learning through it. But I do think that we're not too far from a place, as I said, where we're not using really the term anymore, and it's not so much a you know, session around programmatic. It's just back to the fundamentals of how we do our job well, and this technology is there to play a supportive role. And so, but I think, to specifically your question, we are seeing that as part of that broadening definition, it's now providing access into the big screen at home, right? Connected TVs, same great broadcast quality content, long form, family at home, halo effect of the advertising, right? I think we do ourselves a disservice sometimes in giving it a new acronym and talking about it as a new product or something. It's just an ad on the TV at home. But this technology is now powering that. I think the same is true when you think about audio and really the changing landscape of broadcast across the board, TV, radio, etc. A lot more of it now is being made accessible through technology with all the benefits that come with that we started this conversation with, which I think is a really important thing. And I think that the COVID process, again, has, I think in particular about the broadcast networks or the out-of-home providers who were perhaps a little bit apprehensive about, this evolution, right? And understandably so. I think COVID actually broke down some of those fears and barriers, like, oh, hold on the media owner side, where we had all these pipes connected, we were able to act quicker. We were actually able to get more demand coming in via those pipes quicker. People were at home watching more TV on demand, and you could mobilize those revenues a lot quicker from a broadcaster. So I think some of that fear is dissipated a little bit, it's a good thing. I think that is only going to continue to break down those kind of different definitions and barriers. And as I said, it just becomes the way we do everything.
Yeah. To wrap up, I'll just ask you all one last question. So if you could offer marketers one piece of advice when looking to use programmatic, what would it be? Start with you, Cara.
I would say be realistic. Just because you can do a lot of the things in targeting with the technology doesn't mean you should. So I think marketers can get a little carried away, going, I can blacklist, and then they blacklist 100 websites, and then they whitelist, and then they hyper target, and they say, I want soccer moms in Balimba with a minivan, and you end up with a $200 campaign. So just because you can pull all those levers, it does require time from your agency to do that. So I think be realistic and trust the people that you pick. If once you pick a partner to work with, you have to trust them to be the experts to execute for you.
Great. And Pat?
Yeah, definitely. I was nodding my head, but I definitely echo what Cara said. But I think my other piece of advice is to get curious. I think that it can seem overwhelming and complex if you look at the whole thing, right? But no client needs the whole thing. And I think we have invested a lot of time with our clients to teach them, but about the mechanics and the kind of, the mechanics, the technology and the principles that kind of exist there. Because I think clients who have sort of sought to understand and got really curious and have agencies that can really help them learn that the ways this technology actually works, then feels that puts them in control. They feel like they're much more empowered to go, actually, you know what? I know which bits I need. I know which bits I don't need. I know that the kind of value equation, I'm okay. There's a little bit of risk in this, if we're talking some of the brand safety verification stuff, I'm okay. I've made decisions how to mitigate the risk. So I think that the big thing is get curious and ask your agencies to teach you how it works, not what it is.
Yep. And Tash, what would your advice be?
Kind of reiterating on Kara's and Pat's points. I mean, one thing I think is just educating yourself and understanding the value of your partners and making sure you're working with partners who are valuable. So, you know, when it comes to supply specifically, you know, choosing your supply partners carefully. So reach out to those partners to discuss the ecosystem, to upskill, to really ensure you understand exactly what value they're bringing to the equation. And the benefits of working with them. I think really understanding which partners bring value and which don't, and like having an in-person or phone conversation with them to really understand their value is highly important, you know, part of the whole programmatic piece.
Great. Thank you all for joining us. If you've got any questions, please email us at adnews@yaffa.com.au. Great.
Thank you.